Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. The discussion topic is, how do I get the comic books I want? Well, there's no real easy answer for this one. I don't think there's really any direct path. This is something that you're going to have to figure out on your own, unfortunately. However, I will talk about my experiences. Maybe these experiences align with some of yours. Maybe you'll agree with some of my methods. Maybe you won't, but I'm just letting you know ahead of time. There are many different ways. There is no one direct path other than just having money, which is, I think, what we could all agree on that one, which is the most obvious answer, right? But I don't think there's really any one direct path. Now, I'm pretty sure there are other comic book channels that have their own methods. Again, maybe some of them are similar to mine, maybe not. I don't know. You be the judge on that. All right. So, how do I wind up getting the comic books that I want? And usually, the comic books that people want are the expensive ones, right? They're expensive because maybe first appearances, origin stories, covers, age. You know, what I mean age, like golden age, pre-code, all that sort of stuff. You name it. Well, it's not easy. I'll be honest with you. It takes a lot of perseverance, I think, especially today if you're just getting in the hobby, or maybe you're in the hobby for a little while. It still takes perseverance. It takes perseverance from me. It takes perseverance from other people that have been in the hobby for a period of time. That's one of the key ingredients. You're having to stick with it and having to figure things out, get your feet wet a little bit when it comes to seeing what purchases you can make and what you can make later. Patience too, right? Now, I know that may not be necessarily the answer. I'm going to talk about a couple things. I don't want to go on and on. I know that may not necessarily be the answer everyone's looking for. I mentioned in a previous video, I think this generation, we are so used to getting the things that we want to get ASAP. We are on Instagram, we're on YouTube. We could go on these websites and look up information whenever we want it, and we could buy things whenever we want it. So when it comes to, well, how do I get the comic books I want? I want them now. That may not be in the cards for you, and that's something that you need to accept. I used to be like that too. I used to be like, well, I kind of want these things now. I want to do this. I want to do that. And, as I grew in the hobby and being in the hobby for a while, and maybe some of you share the same experiences, maybe some of you are on your way to this experience, but as I grew in the hobby, I realized that, hey, I don't need to get this book right now. I'll get it when I get it. I'll get it when it's financially right for me, when it's right in many other ways. Right now just may not be the time for me. And that's just the way it is. I remember, I'll give you another little example just to highlight what I'm talking about here. Years ago, for those that have been following me for over almost, I'm almost on YouTube for 11 years now. But if those who've been following me 8 years ago, 9 years ago, I was really collecting all Batman keys. I was trying to get as many Batman keys as possible. And that was back when I only did comic book haul videos. So I was trying to put together these haul videos and get as many Batman keys as possible. And I wasn't able to do it, but I had a problem. Like, oh man, I really was hoping to get this. I was really hoping to make an Ultra Batman haul volume 3. And, it took time for me to realize, well, that's just not in the cards. It'll happen when it happens. Again, to an impatient society, to an impatient collector, that's probably not what you want to hear, but it's probably what you should hear. Okay? Another way that's just a mindset, but I found, when it comes to being helpful, getting the things I want, I have a nice array of books. I have a nice set of books, but also I've let books go over the years. And that may be something that some of you are unwilling to do. Maybe you have to do it right now in order to get a better book. And later on, you could always purchase again what you sold off. If you have that mindset, that might bring you closer to getting towards your goal of getting a comic book or comic books that you really, really want. I know sometimes people say or pride themselves on not having to sell things. Well, that's just not reality for everybody. Whether you have a good job or not, times could get tough, and you should always plan ahead. You should always be putting money away, just to put money away and not live paycheck to paycheck. I understand that may not necessarily be everybody's situation. I get that. Well, then you should reanalyze your hobbies then, you know. But for those of you that are, you know, saying to myself, well, you know, I'd like to get this key or I'd like to get these keys, you might have to let some things go. Now, that's something that I learned. It took years for me to learn that. Something so simple as that. Just like, yeah, well, just sell off what you don't want, or something that you think that you could get again at a later time, and get something that you really want. And if that book that you sold off that you really, really want is something that sticks with you and stays with you, then, you know, down the line, you could revisit that again. I'll give you an example for me. I've sold a lot of books over the years. I've sold, you know, Marvel keys that I was accumulating over the years. And, you know, I realized one day that, you know, look, I had an 8.5 Marvel Premiere 15, which is the first appearance of Iron Fist. I know that's a crappy example because it's not a relatively expensive book. But for what I wanted, adding up to what I wanted, I got rid of it and I sold it. And you're like, oh, do you feel guilty about that? No, I don't think about it at all. The first time I thought about it was making this video, writing that example down on a piece of paper. Because if I wanted the first appearance of Iron Fist again in an 8.5, or most likely a better copy, if that's something that I really wanted, I will get to it again after I'm done getting the books that I think are better to have. You know, and getting it an 8.5 or a 9.0 or a 9.4 Marvel Premiere 15, if you really, really want it, you can make it happen. And it's not that expensive. I mean, I don't want to sound based or anything like that. Like, well, yeah, it's still a 9.4 could be over $1,000 and all that stuff. Yeah, but considering some of the other books that you probably want in your collection that are worth thousands, it might be worth getting rid of that book and revisit it another time. If you even want to revisit it again. There were books that I sold off that I said to myself, I don't want these books again in my collection. And there were books that I sold off that I brought back into the collection, and I said to myself, why the hell did I bring this back into the collection? I don't care about it. So sticking with the hobby and really deciding what you really want, you know, there's a level of growth in there. And of course, there are people that just want everything. They want all the first appearances. They want all the keys and all that stuff. Well, they have to figure out their own way. But if you're just, you know, typical comic book collector that's like, yeah, I want to get my fair share of keys. Yeah, I want to get this. It's expensive, though. Whatever expensive is to you. You know, I don't want to sound like, well, this is expensive and that's not expensive. It's really, it's relative to what your financial situation is. But whatever. Point is, you may have to let some things go, and then you could always get back to them. Get that mindset in. You know, like, if it's important, you'll get back to it. If it's not important, you'll never think about it again and not care. And you'll still have, you'll wind up with a book that you got because of that sale and be happier, right? In your hobby. That's the way I look at it. That's the way I think a lot of people look at it. I think it's a good way to look at it. So that's one way. That's one way. If you have some resources, books that you really don't want anymore, or books that you can get at another time, that's one way to get what you want. Of course, you're going to need probably a little bit of your own money too, so it's not a bad idea if you're planning to get big books. You might put a little bit of money aside for when that book becomes available or that right price becomes available, so then you could jump on it, in addition to selling off some things that you no longer want. So that helps too, okay? So it's sometimes you just can't get that big book just selling a bunch of books. You might have to sell a bunch of books and put a little bit of money aside, but the money that you have to put aside will be far less if you're willing to let some things go. I'll give you another example. When I first started getting books back 10 years ago, all these different books that I thought I'd never get, like first Ra's al Ghul, first Man-Bat, who are still in my collection, higher grades, of course, because I got rid of the original copies, but books that I really have grown to want and love to have in my collection. I used to have an action figure collection. I used to have very rare Thundercats. For those that are into old Thundercat figures, you know some of the rare ones were Bengali and Jaga and several others. Linkso and all that stuff. I had all those, and I just sold them off. And some people, and yeah, some of them go for a little bit more money today, but they went for a lot of money back then too. So some may say, oh, you sold those off? Yeah. And I haven't thought twice about them. I have no desire. You can see because I have Thundercats. I got the Super 7 Thundercats here. I've had a variety of things in the back here when it comes to action figures over the years. A lot of Thundercats stuff, so I'm a Thundercats person. These are the Thundercats that I've always wanted. Or at least these are the Thundercats that I've always hoped they would look like when it comes to action figures. So no, I don't have any real desire. The only original Thundercat figure I still have, and it's more of a sentimental value to me, is the Hammerhand. But it's a roughed up card. All right, but the point is I let some of those valuable figures and other action figures outside of Thundercats go, and it really paved the foundation for me to get a nice collection that I was able to upgrade again and revisit. And probably the last thing I want to say, I don't know if this necessarily helps you, but it's always good, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit, make sure you have a focus. I've seen so many comic book collectors that just want to start grabbing things. And, maybe there's some wisdom in just picking up books that, that you come across. But if you're really having difficulty narrowing in on a purchase that you really want, try to be a little more discriminate. Don't just buy any first appearance that comes along or any book that comes along. Or even any grade. If there's a specific grade or condition that you want, hold out. Be patient. Again, it goes back to some of the things I said earlier. Sometimes patience is a virtue. And a lot of people, I throw myself in that pool as well. Sometimes people are not as patient as they should be when it comes to getting the things that they want, comic books included. You have to be a little patient. You have to persevere. You sometimes have to make sacrifice. You need a little bit of money. These are all the things that, a little bit of your money that's not outside of selling, it's the money that you make, right? That's the obvious one. But you need all those to work in concert to really help build what you got. Now, I'm going to close with this. Now, I was able to get a nice collection, but that took years of work. It's not like one day I woke up and I said to myself, oh, I'm going to start a comic book collection. I'm going to start getting into this. I'm going to start collecting superheroes. I'm going to start collecting pre-code. I'm going to start collecting this. For anybody that's followed me over the years, and many of you have and many of you have not, you would see that it was a slow burn for a lot of things. I started out getting low-grade books, and I've moved some of those more expensive low-grade books to mid-grade books. And some of those mid-grade books are now going into high or high-grade books or high mid-grade books. It's all a process. I didn't roll out of bed one day and say, yo, I need to get the first appearance of the Green Goblin. Let me get a 7.5. I had to start out with something that was lower, 4.0. Which is expensive. No, don't get me wrong. But then it took a while for me to say, let me see if I could do a little bit better. And then I was able to sell that one, put a little bit of my own money, own resources aside, and get a 6.0. And eventually one day, I'm not saying it's going to happen anytime soon, that 6.0 is going to be turned to a 7.5. So it's not something that happens overnight. And again, I say it over and over again in this video, I think a lot of people, collectors, generally speaking, this may not be you, think that it's going to happen for them overnight because they have that impatient attitude. It takes time. Take your time. Don't overspend. Be careful. Be discriminate with what you buy. Let some things go. Be patient. Don't get wrapped up in FOMO, like, oh my God, I heard the Sentry is going to be in Doomsday. Oh, yeah, who cares? That book is not that expensive. But don't get wrapped up in FOMO. I don't think the movies are not affecting comic book characters today as they were about 10 years ago, I don't think, from my experience. Maybe a little bit like the bigger characters like Dr. Doom, but not many of them. So just be patient. Be patient. Make sacrifice. Continue forward and persevere. And I think you'll be able to get what you want, not just in comic books, but with anything. If you have any comments, your own way of getting books that could help people, put them in the comments. Be civil, of course, as always. And thank you for watching, everybody. See you soon.